Look at these hogs, man. Look at the actual censorship that's going on.
Since last summer, parents, school boards, and thirsty political groups have pulled off over 1,500 book bans in schools across the US. That's more bans than in 2018, 2019, and 2020 combined.
The link between pot and violence is well researched. And look who it is, chat. Is that not Brett Weinstein? The link between marijuana and mass shootings. And they've banned, there's been 1,586 books banned in US schools. Oh my God.
But hey, at least we've moved past actually burning books.
Mom, let me throw some.
Okay, maybe not. Moving on. Actual book bans have taken hold in districts in over half the states and hit more than 1,000 different titles. Some books have been removed in many districts. Others got targeted in only one. The titles range from books that only a few advanced readers might be interested in to picture books about making tamales at Christmas. But because sometimes people do think some books are too racy or I guess too spooky, the American Library Association has recommendations for how someone can submit a questionable book to be reviewed and possibly removed. This process usually involves the government's #1 fetish, paperwork, which is supposed to make sure the people trying to pull books have, read those books. But those protocols aren't being followed. Only 4% of reported bans since last summer followed a formal process. Most were handed down by school administrators or board members, often looking to appease screaming adults.
This is pornography, plain and simple, and it does not belong in our schools.
In one district in Pennsylvania, people complained about books and the board banned 441 titles, including a picture book about Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor and a book about black women in STEM. And in Texas, a parent helped ban a book using pretty intimate confessions.
I do not want my children to learn about anal sex in middle school. I have never had anal sex. I don't want to have anal sex. I don't want my kids having anal sex.
These bans aren't just a random...
Okay, what the fuck? Chat, she lying? First of all, you shouldn't want to be that involved in your child's sex life, you fucking freak. Like, if you're an adult, eventually your children are going to grow up and they're going to become adults themselves and they're going to have their own sex lives. Leave them alone, you fucking freak. Jesus Christ.
Random attack on the threat of full bookshelves. Many of the banned books have main characters who are people of color. About a quarter directly address race or racism. A little more than that deal with themes related to being LGBTQ. Whenever there is a time of social progress, people tend to fight back by trying to control information. The Confederacy did that with Uncle Tom's Cabin, and more recently in the 80s, Jerry Falwell and his evangelical masses went after a few of the classics because of what they called obscenity. But some of these new bans are backed up with new laws that can come with harsh penalties.
17 states now restrict teaching race in classrooms, especially in ways that make students feel discomfort, anguish, or guilt. Similar bans have been introduced in at least 25 other states.
The Florida bill that limits talking about gender or sexuality in schools is being used as a model in at least a dozen other places. Teachers who don't follow some of these laws can lose their jobs. Schools that violate the discomfort law in Tennessee can have up to $5 million of funding withheld. Conservative politicians and advocacy groups are playing off that fear by releasing lists of hundreds of books that they think should be forbidden. So even if they're not formally banned, schools are taking these books off the shelves to avoid the fight. Like a district in Florida, where a conservative group released something called the 2021 Porn Report, which is not a breakdown of all the things you looked up on incognito mode. Instead, it's just a list of kids' books they found icky. It includes the book Everywhere Babies, which is about babies, but here's the twist, they're everywhere.
There wasn't an explanation for why it was on a porn list, but the author said it's because of this picture.
I will say, if you think...
Bro, they could just be friends.
Said it's because of this...
Bro, they could just be friends. What the fuck?
This picture.
I will say, if you think two men putting their arms around each other is pornographic, do not watch men's team sports. It gets obscene. Americans don't agree on much, but almost all of them think books should not be banned. These edicts are coming because of the loudest groups of conservative parents and the politicians who have figured out they can get an advantage at the polls by riling those parents up.
We watched parents so upset because there was such sexually explicit material in the library.
Some calling for the immediate removal of this very graphic, pornographic material from our libraries and our schools.
That's not what pornographic means. I legitimately don't think they know what pornographic means. Do they not know what it means? Like, do they not know what the word means? It doesn't mean discussing sex in any way. It doesn't even mean depicting sex. Pornography means depicting sex for the purpose of eliciting sexual arousal. Just discussing sex, even depicting sex, is totally fine. It's not pornographic. These people are fucking psycho. If you teach your kids about how the human reproductive system works, that means you're doing porn, according to a conservative.
Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
It's hard to know if bans actually keep books out of kids' hands. A group
is being taught with...
Confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas that we sometimes express. It didn't say, confess I am a racist because I am white. It says, hey, sometimes we say racist shit. Be okay with expressing it and going, hey, I was fucked up what I said there. I could see how that would be racist. What the fuck is he talking about? Nowhere does it say white babies are automatically racist because they are white. You fucking freak.
With kids that babies are racist.
It's hard to know if bans actually keep books out of kids' hands. A group in Texas has an underground library to caravan banned books to students who can't get them. And places like the Brooklyn Public Library are offering free memberships to US teenagers anywhere, so they can access whatever books they want. And then there's the whole internet. But what is clear is that the people most impacted are already the students. Students who are being robbed of places and ways to ask questions and get information, who are being told that something about themselves is wrong or pornographic, or that their lived experiences has never been and never will be part of the American story.
This is my attitude right now, Chad. I'll be right back. I gotta get water.
Do something! Do something!
So what you saw right there was Joe Biden, who made the decision that, since he is president, he should probably do something every once in a while. So he traveled to Uvalde to go to a memorial for those who were tragically killed last week, to listen to the concerns of the people there, and they provided those concerns, saying, do something, do something, do something, the exact same chant that we and our viewers have been sending towards Joe Biden for months and months and months. And he said, I will. He in fact gave a thumbs up to the crowd and said, I will. That's not how I would have handled it. That felt to me a little bit like what Donald Trump would have done in that situation. They're not interested in your thumbs up, man. They're interested in you actually accomplishing something. But he would have us believe coming out of that trip that he actually is going to do something. He in fact told reporters yesterday that I think things have gotten so bad that everybody's getting more rational about it. At least that's my hope. Now, he also tempered that comment with a little bit about what he thinks he can and cannot do, and we will dive into all of this. But Caroline, I know people have the expectation that he, as president, he made claims that he would do something when he was running before the election. What do you think about the way that he has responded to this most recent, tragedy?
Look, I think that time and time again, Joe Biden fails to live up to the probably single most important reason why we got behind Joe Biden ultimately as the Democratic nominee, and that was for his ability to work in a bipartisan Congress. And so far, time and time again, not only on this issue, but countless different issues, he has failed to, in many cases, even attempt to bring people across the aisle. And it's been such a disaster that people in his own party, Manchin, Sinema, he really cannot get on his side. And again, this was the selling point of Joe Biden. I think that it's, we're coming up on the midterms in a few months, which it's pretty universally acknowledged to be a disaster for the Democrats. And these empty platitudes that once actually we did have a lot of hope for in his ability to get things done and compromise, it's just out the window. And I think the crowds in Uvalde really, really, really show that. I think this is a rarity in cases like this in which obviously they had some really strong words for Governor Abbott as well, but I think it's telling that they are just as angry at Joe Biden about this situation and the refusal to act.
Yeah. Look, he may not take as much money from the NRA. He may not as aggressively put forward, pro-gun talking points. So the blame in that area is going to go more towards the right. But he is also president, so it's only fair to put some of it on to him. And you're right, he pitched himself and his allies, his political allies, his media allies, whether they identified themselves as such or not, assured us that he would have not only a special desire to work with both sides, but a special ability. Any Democratic president, no matter how lefty, was gonna have to try to, in some cases, work with the other side. We were assured with him that he would be able to get it done. And I would ask our audience, what would the difference have been if it was Bernie? Like, the thing that they did in a bipartisan fashion was the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Are they implying that Bernie couldn't have gotten that particular bipartisan infrastructure bill passed that effectively handed huge quantities of money over to special interests? Like, some of it's gonna have good effects, sure, but there's not a lot of corporate interests that were offended by the nature of that bill. I feel like Bernie could have gotten that done. At some point, Joe Biden is going to have to demonstrate where these supposed extra skills lie. And in a time where he's saying we're growing more rational about things, maybe he can grow a little bit more rational about the chances of successfully working with the other side. But we'll see. He has a slightly different view of the other side than I do, and he's going to articulate that.
IDK, if you watch,
I don't know.
There's new Rathbone that dropped today.
By the way, we'll definitely check it out. We'll check it out probably tomorrow, Jeremiah. I don't know about you, Chad, but for me, I don't understand how John. Maybe it's just me, and there's nothing against John, but he always doesn't seem like he gets that worked up about shit. Anna gets worked up about shit. Cenk gets worked up about shit. JR gets worked up about shit. John never seems like he gets that worked up. He's too chill. He's too chill for me. John, how can you listen to Joe Biden say this shit? We've been listening to the same shit for over 20 years now. How can you listen to it without immediately having a brain aneurysm? John has had a few explosive rants. I need more.
This here, he goes on to say, some of this is good, some of it is bad. He says the Second Amendment was never absolute. You couldn't buy a cannon when the Second Amendment was passed. You couldn't go out and buy a lot of weapons, and of course, basically nothing like the weapons that are now routinely commercially available were even possible, had even been hypothesized at that point. But he does go on to say, I can't dictate this stuff. I can do the things that I've done, and any executive action I can take, I'll continue to take.
I can't dictate this stuff. So Biden goes from everything's not happening automatically and easily without any of my intervention to I can't dictate. As if those are the only two fucking settings. The settings are either I dictate everything or it happens easily. Those are not the only settings, you fucking dumb shit.
But I can't outlaw a weapon. I can't change the background checks. I can't do that. So that sounds very much like a pumping of the brakes, but don't worry, because he doesn't need to do it unilaterally. In his mind, he says there are rational Republicans, and he identifies two of them. Senator Mitch McConnell is a rational Republican. Senator John Cornyn of Texas is a rational Republican. Now, we've got a couple of quotes from them in this area, but Caroline, what do you think in particular about those two fairly senior Republican senators, the likelihood that they are going to just discard their entire past with the gun lobby and be a part of some bipartisan solution to this problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to say that and label them as that. But what's sort of more infuriating is Joe Biden is saying that these specific Republicans are getting more and more rational. But okay, that's when you step in. That's when you are supposed to go to them, sit down, lock yourself in a room with them and get things done. If you're so confident that people's Republicans' beliefs on gun control might be shifting, that's not when you let off the brakes. That's not when you stand back and say, great, just, let them do their thing. It's gonna happen. That is when a leader steps in. This is exactly the moment that, look, that's great. And as we say, after these situations, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the time for change. But none of that change is going to happen if you aren't acting as your role as the leader of the United States and bringing these people in and explaining to them why.
Imagine Joe Biden acting as a leader or doing anything of value. I want you to imagine that. Imagine that with your brain.
This is the moment. It's just, it's infuriating. Like, on one hand, he believes that they're rational, but then on the other hand, he's saying, oh, but I can't tap into their rationality because I can't do anything. It makes no sense, and it's really, really disheartening. Yeah. And all of that is to say they're not rational actors, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't, really hammer this particular instance home and try and get them.
They're rational actors for their own political survival, not the good of the country.
Have Republican support.
Yeah. Well, look, he's not that sort of person. He doesn't apply pressure. Not to the right, anyway, not to his true friends. I mean, the situation that he has sketched out, I think you very accurately described a version of it, the version that, if anything is explained to the voters, is the version that they'll get. So in theory, we've got this moment where a particularly heinous school shooting happened, and that has provided an opening, according to him, where something can be done. The issue is that, in theory, there's at least two different forms that opening could come in, or why that would be an opening, and he is presenting the dumbest version of it. So the plausible possibility, which I don't even necessarily believe, but I can see why some people would be, is that this was so horrible that Republicans can potentially be shamed into doing something. That even they realize, dear God, this was too much. I don't know if I can go forward and just say the normal, the normal lines, the normal, what are the tree of liberty, all that BS. I don't know if I can do that. Okay.
Need to look at this data more.
And then in that case, pressure them and get something through while they're feeling the pressure. The longer you wait, the less pressure there will be. And I would argue we're already in the waning days of this being a thing where maybe shame would produce an opening. That is not what Biden is saying. He seems to believe, this was so bad that they will genuinely change their minds. They will shift their actual opinions, not because they feel they have to in the moment, but because, oh no.
No, Miki's running for something? What's she running for now? State Senate? Is she running for, okay. That seems like fun.
We've gone too far down this road. I've been advocating for the wrong thing. I've taken the wrong money. I shall be reasonable right now. And as much as I don't even think the first version is going to work, or if it were going to, that it still would, who the hell would think the second version was going to work? And that is what the media will say, because they have this myth that there are reasonable Republicans, some sort of old school, early aughts version of Republicans that might disagree with us on a few things, but we all just want to make the country a better place. And that just is not real. That it's such a Candyland fairy tale version of how politics actually works. And
so, John, the reason they think that is because they're neoliberal corporatists. So, yes, they all agree about bombing Yemen. They all agree that corporate taxes should go down. They all agree that. The only thing they disagree on is whether gay people should be allowed or whether someone should be able to get an abortion. And if you think that one person should be able to get an abortion, but you also believe in supporting bombing Yemen and destroying unions, then you're a Democrat. If the woman shouldn't have an abortion because you were raised Christian, then you're a Republican. That is our media's version of politics.
And that's the one that the president talking about people becoming increasingly rational is pushing right now, Caroline.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah, I think one thing you pointed out that is sadly probably the most disturbing thing about this is that you're right. The days are waning when we have that power of energy and of shame to act on these certain things. But I would also just like to point out that a lot of these sort of minimal gun control ideas and legislation do actually have some moderate Republican support. I was reading today that things like, increasing.
Okay, that doesn't matter what some voter says. If that was true, we would have passed free college. We would have passed Medicare for all. We would have spent. Why are, they spent their time trying to drive down Medicare for all support, not by driving down support among Republicans. They drove down Medicare for all support by driving down its support among Democrats. And how did they do that? They had Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer shitting on it. They had people who watch NBC go, yeah, it sounds good, but I just don't think it's going to happen. That's why support of those things has dropped a couple points. It's not because some people out there on the far right don't like it as much. It's because people that are in the Democratic Party who supported it in the past were convinced it was just too damaging and alienating to some magical moderate who doesn't exist. They were told, well, you want Trump to lose, right? Well, then you got to give up your dreams. There are hundreds of millions of Americans who have given up their dreams. So they're like, what's one more dream given up? Healthcare for all? I guess I could give that dream up too. That is what's wrong with Americans. A deep cynicism and a superficial optimism has descended on this country. And it's fucking gross, man. Stop being a television pundit. Listen to the man on your TV right now. Stop trying to be a pundit. Stand up for what's right. Stop trying to be a calculator. Oh, if I just do this and that, and if I sort... Shut the fuck up. Tell me what you think is right and demand that. Stop compromising because somebody on the TV told you that it would help the team win. Have a moral backbone. I just want to spew hot takes and make a lot of money. That's my job. It's taken. That job's taken.
Elon Musk is a fucking clown.
True.
Increasing security for gun storage has like an 85% Republican approval rating. So while it's absolutely true that there are certain things that the right will not budge on, including, the ability to have assault weapons at the age of 18, there really are smaller things that we have Republican support, popular Republican support to push.
But Caroline, isn't that the issue? So I think you're right. I think that I think you could list probably quite a few things that the vast majority of Republicans would approve of. But when you say Republican support, as you identified, you mean Republican voters. What is the increasing gun security support amongst Republican senators?
That's actually a good question that I am not certain of because, this just goes back to the problem of our current political system that is so invested in tearing each other apart and not leaning into the fact that there is so much popular support for certain gun control legislation. But you're right, it doesn't even matter in our current system if 85% of Republicans want something when their leaders are beholden to, not just the NRA, but different moneyed interests, gun manufacturers, et cetera.
Mike, I'm in Vermont and I'm in the vacation. It's cool to be on the East Coast so I can watch you longer. Nice. Vermont seems pretty cool. I haven't been up there in a while though. I went up to the mount. I think I went skiing there once 20 years ago.
In our current system, if 85% of Republicans want something, when their leaders are beholden to, not just the NRA, but different moneyed interests, gun manufacturers, et cetera, it really does expose our government isn't interested in solving any of these life-threatening issues. They are invested in tearing us apart when, I happen to think, and I think this particular Uvalde shooting has really changed my perspective a little bit in that, we're living in, this is just an untenable situation for our country to be in. And the more this happens, the more that I just have to sit and rack my brain and wonder how we can get out of it. Because I think it's very clear that our senators, of course, mostly on the right, but even some on the left, maybe it's not in their interest to help us with these gun control laws. And so for that reason, I'm really trying to look inwards, look to my community, my local government to start those changes there. Because as far as I'm concerned, again, 85% popular support for certain gun control restrictions, and that doesn't move the needle a little bit. John, when do we sort of give up on our senators and really just turn locally, turn inward? And that's
okay. How about this? How about we give up on the Constitution and do a constitutional fucking convention? How about we stop trying to uphold a document that is ancient and decrepit? We don't have to keep living under a document written for a totally different society that didn't have electricity. What is going on?
Super depressing, and I hate that, but
I think you're right. And you're right to point people in that direction, because I think it's far more efficient in terms of time, energy for what the potential outcome might be. I personally, as long as I can, I'm going to go at it from the point of view of Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. We need to fight every battle all the time. Unfortunately, that is a recipe for burnout. And burnout isn't necessarily a thing that just all of a sudden you're done. You can see its toll physically on what's left of my face. But yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of people can have a much stronger personal impact by going to the local level, the state level. I don't disagree with you there. Really fast, I want to jump ahead to the chart that we have, graphic 10, to demonstrate a point that Caroline and I were talking about earlier. This is a graphic that I showed on the damage report this morning. This is social media engagement in the wake of different mass shootings. And so there's a lot there to cause you to lose faith in humanity. The Buffalo shooting, it actually did not generate that much talk, despite how horrendous it was, the very clear political motivation of it. A couple million mentions for a couple days, and then that immediately tailed off. Parkland never reached the peak of Uvalde, although of course it was years ago. Social media didn't have as much penetration back then, but it lasted quite a while. Uvalde got a lot of discussion for several days, and now it's down to almost nothing. So look, we're still talking about this because we believe maybe something can be done. We're certainly not chasing eyeballs.
I think you should calm down about that engagement thing. Those metrics, I don't think they're totally accurate.
Because unfortunately, a lot of people who are not 100% tapped into politics have moved on. And it will soon be the case, unless Biden suddenly wakes up and decides, oh wait, I am actually the president, maybe I should do something, that we are going to have to go back into hibernation and just hope that the next massacre is whatever that threshold is, whatever the line is, that will be the thing that causes the Republicans to finally see sense, or at least be shamed into not opposing us. We're gonna have to see what that's like. And we will eventually reach it, by the way. As horrendous as Uvalde is, Caroline, you and I perhaps will do a show someday where we'll be covering a shooting that's even worse, where more kids will have been killed in a more horrendous situation. Maybe it'll be a church, maybe it'll be a restaurant, I don't know. America provides a lot of outcomes. They're all bad, but the setting changes. Anyway.
Absolutely.
No, continue, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think the one thing that may prolong this conversation is the investigation into the police department. I think there are some current updates that are saying that the Uvalde police is not cooperating with the federal investigation as of like a couple hours ago. Definitely need to be fact checked on that, but that might, the just police absolute bungling of this situation might be something that prolongs this conversation. And it's awful, but anything to keep in the media.
I think that you're right. I think that there's a very good chance of that happening, and fingers crossed that will help to provide some positive outcome. My fear that I expressed on the power panel last Friday was that the more we focus on that, the more, whether explicitly or implicitly, it trains people that the issue here was that the cops didn't do their job. Ergo, the solution is the cops do their job. But that's not the solution. The solution is not more cops or better equipped cops or faster response times on cops. That might be the only situation we have, considering the horrible status quo that we've created. But the solution was for this guy to never have a gun in the first place. And so I'll take it if that's the only thing that will keep people invested, but I am a little bit worried about where that could go.
I just think if you look at polls and go, Republican voters think X, Y, and Z, you're doing politics wrong at this point. It's a rhetorical point. It's a waste of time. It doesn't matter. Unless somebody is going to vote against the Republican Party, I don't give a shit what they say in the poll. I don't give a shit what they say. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap